towards the end of the horrors of the Holocaust as they escaped on a train traveling to Siberia. I'm going to fast forward to June 1980. We landed in Israel for our family vacation with little knowledge of what was about to occur. After several days of enjoyment and rest in Jerusalem, we all headed back to Tel Aviv airport. For what? There was another arrival, but not what I had or anyone had expected. Months prior to the El Al arrival, arrangements were made for the exhuming of my father's brothers and father's graves in Poland. How they actually found them is incredibly fascinating and overwhelmingly still a mystery to me, but they did through a few distant friends still living in Poland. The remains were transported to Tel Aviv to be buried in Israel. And my father had wanted all of his remaining family, all of us, to be at that funeral. We loaded the hearses and slowly proceeded from the airport to the cemetery at a criminally slow pace. Now, I might add that, as you all know, LL flights arrive in the afternoon in Tel Aviv. Being that we needed to have customs clear the boxes before they left the plane was a very long, detailed ordeal. Between deplaning, customs, and the actual security in Israel, it was already dusk when we left the airport, which put us at almost midnight near the cemetery, which was in Tel Aviv. Finally, only by the headlights of several cars did my father and his family say Kaddish for his father and brothers after some 45 years. I will never forget. Thank you.
We'll now hear from Esther Zipper, our temple administrator.
Good evening. Today, as not loud enough? Little one, okay. Haven't been here before. Good evening. Thank you. Today, as we remember the Holocaust, Yom Hashoa, the day reminds me of the story my dad had many years ago as a young child growing up in Poland. As a young boy, he soon heard from his neighbors that things were coming down and they had to leave. They weren't sure what, and they didn't know how bad it was, but they knew they had to leave. So his father and his two brothers started to walk and leave. They left everything behind, their belongings, their home, their life as they knew it, and walked and walked. They walked to Russia. They slept in farmyards. They hid at night. They ate berries and walked more until they made it to Russia. They didn't all make it. My father's dad did not. It was very, very cold, and he froze and didn't survive. I don't know how long it took for them to get to Russia. I know they were separated. I don't know the details. I know they saw a lot and lived through a lot. But they did get there. But then they didn't see each other for a really long time. Hence, the article I had my sister dig up last week before she left town. 3 brothers meet after 20 years. It was a really long time. They hadn't heard from each other. Through the grapevine, this is way before internet, and they heard that one was in Shreveport and one was in Argentina. They were able to find each other somehow years later. 20 years later. And they got to meet in New York and started a relationship through the years. It makes me think about communication now, how we can just pick up the phone, text someone, call someone we love, and we always should do that very often and hear their voice when we can. They separated for many years, but after a really long time, they did get together again, and I did get to know them. My Uncle Sam from Louisiana, my Uncle Haim from Argentina, but couldn't speak English, so I really couldn't talk to him. He only spoke Spanish. And today, I reach out, and I'm in touch with his grandchild, who lives in Miami, my cousin Carlos and Vanessa, the grandchild of my Uncle Haim. It's important that we tell people our story. It's important that we educate people. People don't know that this really exists. I've heard some really, really do not believe, and we all know they do not believe the Holocaust ever existed. If there's a way we can educate people and know and share our experiences, I think that is really so important. They shared stories when they got together in New York of those they had lost in concentration camps, of stories of people they hadn't seen in many times. But although none of them are alive right now, they were able to share the bonds, the stories, and I was so blessed to even have both of my uncles at my wedding and stay in touch with some of their family members. Thank you.
Quote from Leo Beck. Our history is a history of nobility of soul, of human dignity. It is history we have recourse to when attack and calamity befall us. God has led our ancestors from generation to generation. God will guide us and our children's children through these days. We stand before God strengthened by God's commandment that we fulfill. We bow before God and stand direct before humanity. We worship God and remain firm in all vicissitudes. Humbly, we trust in God and our path lies clear before us. We see our future. And I'd like now to call up our TBO president, Matthew Meyer.
Good evening. So when we put this together originally, we had a speaker, and as you can guess, our speakers are getting much older, and our speaker was unfortunately not able to do this tonight. So we decided to kind of represent our congregation, and I thank the two of you for sharing your stories tonight. My story is a little bit different. I'm obviously the next generation. It was my grandmother who was born in 1926, the fourth daughter of Hungarian immigrants. Unlike her three older sisters, she was born in the United States. Her older sister, Teresa, was 18 years old when my grandmother was born, and her two middle sisters were 9 and 12 years older than her. My family, like so many others in this room, experienced the horrible levels of discrimination that were occurring in Europe during the early part of the 20th century. They decided to flee Hungary, and America was virtually their only option. Thankfully for them and for me, their decision to leave everything behind and start all over saved their lives. The rest of the family that stayed in Europe was not so fortunate. They were all murdered at the hands of the Nazis. My great-grandparents never forgot what they lived through. They knew and experienced anti-Semitism firsthand. They made sure that their four daughters never forgot where they came from and encouraged them to stand up and fight for Jewish causes and help other Jews whenever possible. These lessons were passed to me from my grandmother, very much the same. Teresa, the oldest daughter, married soon after my grandmother was born. By the late 1930s, a program or system was created where European Jewish men, mostly professionals, could be saved from the Holocaust by traveling to America to marry an American woman once they arrived here. My two aunts, the middle two girls, Madeline and Violet, agreed to marry two men, sight unseen, to save them from the atrocities that would have surely been waiting for them. These two men traveled to America, met and married my aunts, also sight unseen. Violet married a doctor named Leslie Schwartz, and Madeline married a doctor named Joseph Zoltan. Violet and Leslie remained married for almost 50 years until her death in 1985. And Madeline and Joseph remained married for over 50 years until his death in 1996. My Aunt Madeline is still alive at 107 this September, living in Chicago. Between these two ladies and their husbands, they had 7 children, 17 grandchildren, and 30 plus great-grandchildren. If you add my Aunt Teresa and my grandmother, we're up into, I think, the 80s or 90s at this point. It's hard to keep track. I'm grateful for my great-grandparents and their values. I'm grateful to my aunts for setting such an example of self-sacrifice. Again, when we started this was going to be the conclusion of my story, but in the last week or so, things have changed in our world here in the United States. We're all aware of our current political climate, the conflicts regarding our Jewish students, and the anti-Semitism on college campuses, as well as, obviously, the attacks in Israel. When my family escaped to America, there was no other safe haven to flee to. That's not so anymore. Israel recognizes anyone of Jewish faith as a citizen of their country. Jews across the globe if they can escape their situation, can go to Israel without question. This isn't the case in America even today. We're turning people away as they try to enter. As Jewish Americans, we absolutely must support Israel now more than ever. History repeats. Tonight we remember the Holocaust and the 6 million Jews that lost their lives. Let us remember not only that these lives were taken, that families were destroyed, that evil was allowed to live and breathe on earth. Let us also remember that the road to evil is paved and painted with apathy. Do not let a day go by where you become apathetic to the Jewish struggle. Pay attention to the political rhetoric and vote accordingly. Donate to charities and causes that support Israel. Write letters to universities. Even if your kids and grandkids don't attend the school, write a letter anyway. If we lose Israel, we lose the only place on earth that is guaranteed to support us, each of us, for the very same reason that people hate us, because we're Jews.
Page 596 in our prayer book. We have lived in numberless towns and villages, and in too many of them we have endured cruel suffering. Some we have forgotten, others are sealed in our memory, a wound that does not heal. 100 generations of victims and martyrs, still their blood cries out from the earth. And so many at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Baba Yar. What can we say? What can we do? How bear the unbearable or accept what life has brought to our people? All who are born must die, but how shall we compare the